after my dad died, my stepmom, Olivia, told me, "You have 24 hours to leave this house. It's mine now." I thought she was joking until the next morning when she threw my bags outside. A lawyer gave me a letter that made her scream in anger. I stood there, looking at my suitcase on the ground, my hands shaking. The door slammed shut, and her words kept repeating in my head, "You have 24 hours to leave. It's mine now." At first, I thought she was just being dramatic, but she wasn't kidding, she meant it, and just like that, I was kicked out of the only home I'd ever known, right after my dad was buried. Let me explain. My name is Jack. My mom died when I was 6, so it was just me and my dad. He wasn't rich, but he worked hard and made sure I had everything I needed. He met Olivia when I was in high school. At first, she seemed nice, the kind of person everyone liked right away, but after they got married, she changed. She made it clear she didn't want me around. Still, my dad was happy, so I didn't say anything. A few years later, my dad got sick, really sick. It was cancer, and it happened fast. I quit everything to take care of him, but Olivia? She barely helped. She acted like pretending to be sad was harder than actually caring for him. I was the one who took him to the doctor, sat with him during chemo, and held his hand when he was too weak to talk. Olivia always had excuses, she was too busy, or she had errands to run. Really, she was just spending his money and living her life like nothing was wrong. Then, suddenly, he was gone, and less than 24 hours after we buried him, Olivia turned to me and said, "Pack your things and get out." I laughed, thinking she was just being mean. "You're kidding, right?" I said, but she wasn't. Her face was cold. "This house is mine now. You're an adult, figure it out." I still didn't believe her until she came back with a trash bag and started throwing my clothes into it. "You can't do this," I said, trying to stop her. "Oh, but I can," she said with a sneer. "Your dad left everything to me, the house, the money, everything. There's nothing here for you." I tried to argue, but she just smiled, like she'd been waiting for this moment. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch with a few things I'd grabbed, thinking about everything my dad and I had talked about, the house, his will. I had no money, nowhere to go. My dad had always been careful, but he wasn't thinking clearly at the end. Did he really leave me with nothing? The next morning, I went to see my dad's lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. When I walked into his office, he sighed like he knew why I was there. "I was expecting you," he said, handing me a thick envelope. I opened it, my hands shaking. Inside was a letter from my dad, written before he died. "Jack, if you're reading this, Olivia has shown her true colors. I knew she'd try to take everything from you. That's why I made sure she can't. The house isn't hers. The money isn't hers. She'll find out everything she thought she got is actually yours. Reynolds will explain. Stand tall, son. Don't let her push you out of what's rightfully yours." I stared at the letter, my heart racing. "She lied," I said quietly. "She did," Reynolds said. "Your dad saw this coming. Olivia gets nothing." I couldn't believe it. "She told me she got everything," I said. "She thinks she did," Reynolds replied. "But your dad put the house and all the money in a trust under your name. He left her with an allowance. But even that's gone now because of what she did." I was shocked. "She's going to lose it," I said. Reynolds smiled a little. "She already has." I left his office and drove straight home. I wasn't scared anymore, I was angry. When I got there, Olivia was on the porch, drinking her fancy coffee like nothing had happened. She looked surprised to see me. "I thought I made myself clear," she said, crossing her arms. I walked up to her and handed her the letter. "Read this," I said. She grabbed it and started reading. Her smug look disappeared, and her hand started shaking. Then she screamed, a loud, angry scream that made the neighbors look out their windows. She crumpled the letter and yelled, "You're lying. This isn't real. He wouldn't do this to me." I pulled out another envelope with the legal papers from Reynolds. "It's all here, the house, the money, everything. You own nothing, Olivia. In fact, you're trespassing on my property." She froze, then her face turned red with anger, and she lunged at me, trying to scratch me. I grabbed her wrists and pushed her back. "You need to leave, now," I said firmly. She glared at me, her eyes wild, then she smiled slowly, like she had a plan. "You think you've won?" she said. "You really think this is over?" I knew that look. It was the same one she had when she was about to do something sneaky. I didn't say anything. I just pointed to the driveway and said, "Get out." She didn't move. "You can't just throw me out like this. I have nowhere to go," she said. I laughed. "You threw me out less than 24 hours after my dad died. Don't expect me to feel sorry for you." She glared at me, then turned and stormed inside. I followed her. She went to the bedroom she shared with my dad and started packing a suitcase. But she wasn't leaving, she was taking my dad's things. I grabbed the suitcase from her. "No," I said, "you don't get to take anything." She laughed. "You think you can stop me?" "I know I can," I said. She reached for my dad's watch on the nightstand, the one he always wore. "That's mine," she said. I stepped closer. "That was my dad's. You don't get to keep it after how you treated him." She clenched her jaw and said, "You think I didn't love him? You think I don't deserve something after all those years?" "Get out," I said. She grabbed the watch and shoved it in her pocket. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then walked out, slamming the door behind her. And that's when everything fell apart. The nightmare was just beginning. I should have known Olivia wouldn't give up easily. She was like a snake, quiet and sneaky, but ready to strike when you least expected it. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. I checked it and saw tons of missed calls and messages, from people I didn't know, from family I hadn't talked to in years, and even from reporters. I opened the first message. "You should be ashamed of yourself for throwing your stepmom out. Your dad would be disgusted." My stomach sank. I clicked on a link someone sent me, and my heart raced. It was an article with a big, dramatic headline: "Millionaire's greedy son kicks out heartbroken widow days after husband's death." I scrolled through it, feeling sick. The article made Olivia look like a saint, a loving wife who stood by my dad during his illness, only to be heartlessly thrown out by her selfish stepson. The worst part? They had a picture of me from the funeral, looking cold, and next to it, a fake photo of Olivia sitting on a suitcase, pretending to cry. This lying, I stopped myself, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Olivia was good. She had gone to the media first, spinning her story before I could even react, and people believed her. The comments were full of hate, strangers calling me a monster, family members turning against me. Then I got another notification. My heart stopped. Olivia was suing me, for the house, for the money, for everything. She wanted it all. But I wasn't going to let her win. I sat there, holding my phone, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about revenge for her, it was about destroying me. She wanted to ruin my name, take my dad's house, and make me look like the bad guy. But she underestimated me. Olivia was sneaky and manipulative, great at playing the victim, but she wasn't as smart as she thought, and she had just made a big mistake. I took a deep breath and tried to think clearly. The lawsuit was nonsense. The house was legally mine, in a trust under my name. She had no right to it, but Olivia didn't care about the truth. She cared about controlling the story, and the public was eating it up. I needed proof, real proof. Then I remembered something, a secret my dad had never told her. I grabbed my keys and drove to my dad's lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. When I walked into his office, he was on the phone, probably dealing with the mess Olivia had caused. He hung up and sighed. "I assume you've seen the news," he said. "Oh, I've seen it," I said, "and I'm not letting her get away with this." Reynolds leaned back in his chair. "She's playing the victim," he said. "She knows she can't win in court, but she can make your life miserable." I clenched my jaw. "Is there anything we can use to stop her? I need proof of what she really is." Reynolds gave me a long look, then opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "This," he said, sliding it across the desk, "is something your dad never told her about." I opened the envelope. Inside were legal papers, bank records, and something that made my stomach drop, a private investigator's report. "What is this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. Reynolds sighed. "Your dad was smart, Jack. Near the end, he started to suspect Olivia was up to something, so he hired someone to look into her." I felt a chill as I read the report. Olivia had been cheating on my dad for years, not just with one man, but several. Some of them were even using my dad's money. She had been stealing from him, putting money into secret accounts while pretending to be the perfect wife. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a signed contract, a prenup she didn't know about. My dad had set it up before marrying her. If she ever cheated, stole, or did anything shady, she'd get nothing. I stared at the papers, my heart racing. "She has no idea about this, does she?" I asked. Reynolds smirked. "Not a clue." I let out a breath. This was it. This was the end. Olivia thought she had tricked my dad into giving her everything, but the whole time, she had been walking into a trap. The takedown. I left Reynolds' office with the documents, my mind racing. Olivia had gone to the media first, that was her big move. She thought it would protect her, but now I had the power to destroy her. I made some calls, first to a journalist who cared about the truth, then to my dad's closest friends, people who really knew him, people the media would listen to. Then I went home and waited. It didn't take long. The next morning, a new article came out, "Grieving Widow or Heartless Scammer? The Truth About Olivia's Secret Affairs and Stolen Money." It went viral fast. The article had screenshots of the prenup, bank records showing how she stole from my dad, and photos of her with other men while my dad was dying. The public turned on her instantly. The same people who had called me a monster were now tearing her apart. The comments were brutal. The media that had made her look like a saint now called her a fraud. Then came another blow, a fraud investigation. Turns out, some of the money she stole was used illegally. Now, The IRS was after her. The final blow came the day after the article. Olivia showed up at my door, not the confident woman I knew. She looked terrible. Her hair was messy, her fancy clothes were wrinkled, and her face was pale. She even went on TV, crying about how I had set her up and stolen her inheritance. But no one believed her anymore. Then the fraud investigation dug up even more dirt. Olivia had set up a fake charity in my dad's name and stolen thousands of dollars. Now, the feds were involved. One morning, Reynolds called me. "Turn on the news," he said, sounding amused. I grabbed the remote and flipped to a news channel. There she was, Olivia, being dragged out of her apartment in handcuffs. Her hair was a mess, her fancy robe slipping off as she screamed, "This is a mistake. I'm innocent. My husband was rich, I deserved that money." The officers didn't care. They shoved her into a police car as cameras flashed. I sat back on the couch and breathed out. It was over, for real this time. Olivia's fate? The trial was quick. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, fake documents, and even recordings of her talking about stealing from my dad. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison for fraud, stealing, and tax evasion. She had no money, no house, and no one to help her. The little money she had left was taken by the government to pay her debts. She went to prison with nothing. My revenge? A quiet life. After everything settled, I cleaned the house, removing every trace of her. I fixed up my dad's office, turning it into a place where I could finally relax. And the money she stole? I donated it all in my dad's name, to cancer research, shelters, and causes that actually helped people. The final insult? The news reported where the money went. Even after prison, Olivia could never escape my dad's shadow. His name would be remembered for kindness, while hers would always be tied to greed and fraud. The last time I saw her was years later. I was in a grocery store when I spotted her. Olivia. She looked older, her face lined with stress. She wore cheap clothes, and her hair was dull. The confidence she once had was gone. She saw me, froze for a second, then turned and rushed out of the store like a coward. I smiled to myself. I didn't need to say anything. She had lost, and she knew it.